Hey, friend, welcome back to the Anchored with Purpose podcast. I'm so glad you're here as we continue with our Anchored in Every Area series, walking through the 10 life anchors that help us to live with intention, peace, and purpose. Today, we're diving into a big one: career and business. Whether you're working full time, staying home with littles, running your own business, or in a season of transition, this anchor touches all of us. So I want you to know your work matters, no matter where or how you're doing it. And today, we're going to talk about how your career connects to your identity, your purpose, and your calling as a daughter of God. Let's start with this truth: God created work. From the very beginning in Genesis, God gave Adam and Eve a job to do: cultivate the garden. That was before sin ever even entered into the picture. That tells us something important. Work is not a punishment, it's a purpose. Colossians 3:23 to 24 tells us this: whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord and not for human masters. So whether you're in an office, behind a counter, running a business, or folding laundry between diaper changes, God sees your work and it matters. Here's what studies show. According to a Gallup poll, only 33% of Americans feel engaged in their work. Only 33%, guys. That's so sad. And yet, when people feel a sense of purpose in their work, their satisfaction and mental health skyrocket. I gotta tell you, I feel that one big time, because even when I was in a six-figure job where I was making bank, but I was part of that 33% of Americans. Oh, Joe, no, just kidding. I was the other, 67% of Americans, if my math is right, that did not feel engaged in my work. And my mental health was struggling. When I say struggling, I mean legitimately 9 anxiety attacks a day, like crippling anxiety attacks where I am bent over in pain because that squeezing, painful feeling in my chest just kept coming on. Barna research shows us that Christians who feel called to their work are more likely to report higher spiritual well-being and joy. Now that's huge because it reminds us that it isn't just about climbing a ladder or chasing a paycheck. It's about finding meaning in what we do. Now, I just gave you a little glimpse into my journey, and I've shared before on the podcast, but I'm going to share this again when it comes to finding purpose in your work. So right after college, I began my career path, and I was on a fast track to promotion career path with a big box retailer. And it was great. I was making so much money, and I was rising through the ranks to where I got promoted to run my own store here in upstate New York. So I moved from Pennsylvania to upstate New York to run this store, was making 6 figures. My bonuses were 40% of my annual salary on good years. So not every year, but on good years. So when you think about that, my bonuses were bigger than what most people's starting salaries were back then, because, this was a long time ago, guys. But as I was making all of that money, rising through the ranks, my responsibilities grew in my job. I had over 200 employees. I was running a $28 million store, and it was high stress. So when I tell you I was having 9 anxiety attacks a day, that's no joke. I was legitimately having 9 anxiety attacks a day. And while the money was great, I was the breadwinner, it came at a price. And that price was I was working 70-hour weeks, nights, weekends, holidays, and it was rough. So when I was pregnant with Andrew, I just couldn't do it. I remember a coworker of mine who ran a store about 20 minutes south of me. One day we were in her office and she was crying and she was like, "Melissa, I never see my baby." And I came home and I told Jeff, I was like, I can't do that. Like, I want to be a hands-on mom. I want to be the kind of mom who gets to be there for everything. I want to be there to, tuck my kids in at night. I want to be there to, to be involved in the classroom and get to spend quality time with them. And so I left and had like no real plan. I then started working at a job where, guys, I was making a third of what I was making in an office for a consulting firm. And it was boring. I got to learn some things that I never learned, but I wasn't working for a great leader. It was a company that, didn't really share my values. And then we started looking at daycare. And I found that after daycare costs, with my new salary, making a third of what I was making, that I would only be bringing home about $600 a month. And as Jeff and I were talking about that, I just remember saying, like, my gosh, for $600 a month, like, that's it? I mean, somebody else raising my baby every day while I'm here at this job that I definitely don't love, working for a man that I don't share values with, that doesn't sound good to me. And, at this point, we had really adjusted our lifestyle from me making six figures to making a third of that, plus no more of those big 40% bonuses either. So, Jeff had looked at the finances and he said, okay, you need to be able to cover your car payment, car insurance, and these other couple of expenses. So, if we can find a way to come up with the $600 a month, then you can leave and we don't have to worry about daycare and you can raise our baby. And so I'm not kidding you when I say less than a week later, my neighbor reached out to me and she said, "Hey, Melissa, I know you're pregnant right now. And I just wanted to ask if you ever considered staying home and maybe helping out with other people's kids. I've got a 4-year-old that's going to be going into universal pre-K. But it's only a couple of hours a day, and I need someone to take him there and pick him up. And by the way, I would pay you, and then he would come hang out with you for the rest of the day. And by the way, I would pay you $600 a month to do this." Boom. I mean, that could have only come from the Holy Spirit, right? So we made the plan, and that's what I did. And I did that for almost a school year. And during that time, I also was on this crazy fitness journey, which I will share about in a different episode, but started teaching Zumba because I loved going to my Zumba classes back then. And so I was balancing raising a newborn and infants and going into, taking care of a 4-year-old, which I had never, like, aside from babysitting years ago, didn't have, experience with every single day with a 4-year-old boy. So that was a whole new challenge and adventure. And then I began teaching Zumba right after that. And that was great because it was some time. Um, I was then getting like some benefits from working at the Y, which was great, like free memberships and that kind of thing. And I had a blast teaching Zumba. Now, when I tell you I made like $13 a class, I'm not even kidding. So I just kept going down in the ranks, right, for what I was making. But I was feeling fulfilled because I had the opportunity to raise my son hands on. I got to help another mom out, and I got to do something I loved, which was dancing multiple days a week. And it was just amazing. So, fast forward a little bit, and then I started a business. I was in direct sales with a company called 31 Gifts that I just loved. And I just put all of my skills in business and leadership into it. And while I was still teaching Zumba, I rose through the ranks there too, had Sean. So now I'm like juggling a toddler, a newborn, teaching Zumba, running this business. It was a lot, but I have to tell you, I was feeling so fulfilled. And, like I was working in my purpose when it came to 31 and running that direct sales business. So much so that I had finally said to Jeff, hey, look, I do love teaching Zumba, but I have to say, if I took this time away from what I was spending on coming up with new routines and having to go teach classes, like if I had this time to dedicate to my business instead, I could bring in more money and I could get the opportunity to really work this business the way I want to. And I had the opportunity to do that, and it was incredible. In fact, at one of our leadership council meetings with 31, our founder and CEO, Cindy Monroe, I'll never forget, we were in this ballroom and we were all at little tables. And she had said, I would love to hear from some of you, like how this has changed your life. And I stood up and I said, I found a piece of myself that I didn't know was missing. When I think back to how I was making that six figures and rising through the ranks and how that made me feel like I had done something, I had achieved something. Yes, because I'm an achiever and I was making a lot of money. And then to dial all of that back, like dial it back to the consulting firm where I made a third of the money, then dialing it back to staying home and taking someone else's kid back and forth to preschool, and then dialing it back and teaching Zumba class for like $13 a class. But then I was able to build something. I was able to be reminded of not just the woman I was, but how I could make an impact and how I could be working in my purpose. And in fact, 31, it was a faith-based business. I wish it was still around because it's such a wonderful company. But it really helped me get connected with my faith too. So a lot of my journey in connecting with my purpose came from 31. So much so that in 2019, I had started my Anchored with Purpose blog and published my faith journal digitally and published some other things digitally, and was doing some speaking engagements and helping some teams with some dream workshops and loving it. And I was also having the busiest year in my direct sales career. I had achieved $100,000 in sales. I had built my team. I had earned all of the trips I wanted to earn. I got to speak on stage in front of 10,000 women, but I was burnt out. And it was a lot. We were also in the process of buying a new house. And my husband and I were talking, and he said, I think it's time for you to let go of 31. And I remember thinking, what? I love this. I love what I'm doing here. Why would you tell me? Like, why would you think that? He's like, I just really have this feeling. He said, you're running yourself ragged. You said you wanted to be a hands-on mom, and you went from making six figures to, now with 31, I was bringing in a decent income, but I was so busy building this business that I was working nights and weekends. Part of the reason that I left my super big role in retail. And so, first, after some, first I was really mad at him and cried and wasn't super nice about it. And then, upon some reflection and thought, I just said, God, lead me, show me what you want me to do. And God confirmed for me that it was time for me to leave 31 and asked me to trust him. And I did. And so we had a wild summer with moving into the new house, me having that speaking engagement where I spoke at conference. And then I had done some of my last parties. And I remember asking God, like, okay, so what is next? And he was showing me to actually publish the faith journal. And so just trusting him each step of the way was so helpful. But then the journey doesn't end there. So Anchored with Purpose, it didn't just take off there the way I thought it would. God kind of led me through all of this. And in 2020, I started, I was already volunteering for the church for like 3 or 4 years. And God started calling me into working for the church. And that made a huge difference. Like then I really was feeling dialed into my purpose. And that took an awful lot of trust as well. And I've shared this part on the podcast before where I then transitioned into working for a Catholic nonprofit called Rebuilt Parish. And I've loved what I've been able to do with them too. So my whole point from of sharing my story with all of you is that no, there's different reasons for each season and each part of life that you're in. And your job might not necessarily be a part of your purpose. And you may not, you may not feel like, oh gosh, I know exactly what's next. Not what's next. You may not know that. You may be working in a job where you already feel so tied in to your purpose. And that is incredible. What I've learned from all of this is that our value doesn't come from our job title, it comes from God. And when we align our work with His purpose, that's when everything starts to shift. Now, we live in a culture that defines success by salary, promotions, and productivity. But in the kingdom, success looks like faithfulness. Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established." Whew, friend, I had this as one of my memory verses a couple of weeks ago because I had to keep reminding myself like, I'm someone who I'm achiever. I'm an achiever. I want everything to happen and I want it to happen now. And if I don't make it happen according to the timeline that I set, I feel like I haven't done a good job. Well, God is using this verse to remind me, hey, Melissa, just commit your work to me. Your plans will be established. Don't worry about the rest of it. And in fact, Proverbs 16:9 is really helping me because, he talks about in there, many are the plans in a man's heart, but the Lord will establish his steps. And that is so helpful, knowing that, okay, as long as I'm doing the first part, right, committing my work to the Lord, my plans will be established. And then, God puts plans into my heart, but I have to remember that He will help me establish those steps. And all I have to do is follow them. And God cares less about what you're doing and more about why and how you're doing it. Are you showing up with integrity? Are you working in a way that reflects your values? Now, this is where I was talking that in that one role as a consulting firm, I was working in a way that reflects my values, but the company didn't reflect my values, and that was hard for me. And not all of this isn't to say you need to quit your job and go work for a faith-based organization. No, friend, absolutely not. We need believers and people who love God in all aspects. So we need you to keep doing what you're doing, but doing it in a way that is right in the Lord's eyes. So I want you to also think, are you open to His leading, even when it takes you in a direction you didn't expect? Remember, at first, I was not open to the leading of leaving 31 and going into the unknown, but then I trusted and was open to His leading, and that has opened up more doors than I could have possibly imagined. Now, when we talk about this anchor, it's more than just about having a career. It's about asking yourself these questions. Is my work aligned with my God-given gifts? And this is really important because when we're working with our gifts and working in our gifting, that helps us because when we're working in our gifts, it's easier for us. When we're working against our gifting, there's so much more work involved. That is what leads to burnout. And I've experienced that in different roles too. Another question to ask yourself is, am I making room for the things that matter most? Faith, family, health, all of the other life anchors. Are you making room for those? Now, this is where when I shared that, Jeff gave me that reminder that, hey, you had said you wanted to be a hands-on mom, but yet you're missing half of the kids' baseball games this season because you had all of these parties and events all scheduled out ahead of time before we got the baseball schedule. Ooh, that was an eye opener, and that really woke me up. And another question I want you to ask, Am I building something that honors him and blesses others? So, this is especially important if you are running your own business. Is what you're doing just to make money? Or are you doing this to honor the Lord and to help bless others and make an impact? And friend, you might be in a season of building your dream business, or maybe feeling stuck in a job that drains you, or maybe you've pressed pause on your career to raise a family. All of these are holy callings. Ecclesiastes 3:1 reminds us this: there's a time for everything and season for every activity under the heavens. There is purpose in your now, even if it doesn't look like what you imagined. And what if God is calling you to shift? Trust that He'll provide you. Maybe this is your time to dream again. Maybe it's your time to rest. Maybe it's your time to start something new. Now, in this series, I love giving you some journal prompts. So here are some journal prompts and some reflection questions to help you discern your next right step. So first, what does success mean to me right now? What gifts has God given me that I'm not currently using? Ooh, I love that one. Number 3, am I clinging to a job or a business out of fear or false identity? And number 4, what would I pursue if I wasn't afraid? Oh, I love that question. What would I pursue if I wasn't afraid? Now, here's some action steps for you if you're feeling a little bit stuck. Pray about your current season and ask God to show you where He's working. And ask Him to show you the next right step, too. That's one of my favorite little breath prayers for Him. Another action step here. Number 2, make a list of your strengths and how you're using them. And number 3, if you're in a transition, consider a mentor or a coach to help you walk it out. And friend, if you want to talk to me about this transition to see if it would be a right fit for me to work with you through this transition, give me a shout. You can email me, melissa@anchoredwithpurpose.com, or you can book a free 45-minute Anchored Insights discussion where we can talk through all of this. And friend, no matter where you are not behind. You are not too late, and you are not defined by your job title. So again, whether you're folding laundry, closing sales, leading a team, or dreaming of a new chapter, God is using it all. One of my favorite scriptures right here, Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for good for those who love Him and who have been called according to His purpose. Friend, stay anchored in Him. Let Him lead your career. Let Him shape your business. Let Him define your value. He's not finished with your story yet. Now, friend, if this episode encouraged you, will you please share it with a friend who's navigating her own work or business journey? And if you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe and leave us a review so that other women just like you can find this podcast and be encouraged. Until next time, friend, stay rooted in faith and anchored with purpose. I'll see you next time.